The moment my son ripped the car keys out of my hand, the metal scraped across my knuckles and clattered against his wedding ring. He didn't whisper it. He didn't hesitate. Standing in my own doorway, with the afternoon sun spilling across the floor and Mrs. Donnelly watering her hydrangeas across the street, he said it loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. "You can't drive anymore, Mom. You're done." Hello, my dear friends. Grace here. Imagine your own child deciding your limits without asking you. Is that care or control? Tell me in the comments and stay with me, because this one takes a turn you won't expect. I am 72 years old. I make my own coffee every morning in a chipped porcelain cup from Lisbon. I pay my bills before the due date. I still cook lentil stew from scratch, the way my late husband Thomas liked it, with bay leaves and a pinch of smoked paprika. I have never had a single accident in 48 years of driving, and yet there I was, being dismissed like a faulty appliance. "Give them back, Ethan," I said evenly. My voice didn't shake. I made sure of that. He held the keys between two fingers as if they were contaminated. "You got confused last month. You forgot where you parked at Greenfield Plaza. Sabrina and I talked about this. It's not safe." I did not forget. I parked near the bakery with the lemon tarts shaped like little suns. I remember because the girl behind the counter complimented my scarf. But Ethan wasn't interested in memory. He was interested in authority. Sabrina stood half a step behind him, arms folded, that sympathetic tilt to her head that always felt rehearsed. "Maggie, it's for your own good," she said softly. "We're just trying to help." Help. That word again. It had followed me for years. "Let me handle the paperwork, Mom. Let me set up your online banking. It's easier if I put the utilities in my name." Each sentence wrapped in silk, tied with gratitude, and tightened just enough that I never questioned it. "Where are you taking my keys?" I asked. "We're keeping them," Ethan replied, "until you pass a driving assessment." I studied his face. The same face I once wiped clean after spaghetti dinners. The same hands I held while he learned to cross the street. Now those hands were closing around something that wasn't his. "I'm not asking," he added. There it was. Not concern, not fear, control. The house smelled of furniture polish and simmering thyme from the pot on the stove. My house. Paid for long before Sabrina ever learned how to pronounce our last name correctly. The hardwood floors beneath us were refinished with money from my retirement fund. Every nail, every hinge, every mortgage payment had passed through my hands at some point in life. "You're being dramatic," Ethan said, exhaling sharply. "We'll drive you wherever you need to go. Groceries, church, doctor. You won't lose anything." I almost laughed. "You won't lose anything" is what people say right before they start deciding what you're allowed to keep. I walked past him slowly and opened the small drawer of the walnut console table near the door. Ethan stiffened. He thought I might reach for medication, or maybe my reading glasses. Instead, I took out a slim leather notebook, worn at the corners. "What is that?" he asked. "Memory," I replied. Inside were dates, transfers, account numbers, property tax confirmations, the details of a family trust Thomas and I established years ago. I had written everything down. Not because I was forgetful, because I understood something my son did not. Independence is not a feeling. It's paperwork. "Mom, you don't need to get paranoid," Ethan muttered. I closed the notebook and looked at him carefully. "Actually, Ethan, I do." Sabrina shifted her weight. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "You're overreacting," Ethan insisted. "We're protecting you." From what? I asked calmly. Myself? He didn't answer. The wind nudged the front door slightly wider. Mrs. Donnelly's garden shears clicked outside in a steady rhythm. The world continued as if nothing significant was happening. But something had shifted. Not in my reflexes. Not in my eyesight. In the balance of power. You think this is about driving, I said quietly. It isn't. He frowned. Then what is it about? It's about who gets to decide what I can and cannot do. He shook his head. You're not thinking clearly. I stepped closer, close enough that he could see my eyes were steady. I am thinking more clearly than I have in years. He laughed then, dismissive and careless. Like what? You're going to punish me? Take away Sunday dinners? I held his gaze. Like my signatures, I said. He stopped smiling. Like my accounts, I continued. The silence thickened. And like the roof over your head. Sabrina inhaled sharply. Ethan blinked as if I had spoken in another language. He hadn't yet connected the dots. He still believed this was about car keys. But I knew something he had forgotten. Every payment on his apartment, every down payment on the house he bragged about to his friends, every emergency temporary loan that somehow never needed repayment. My name was woven into those walls as surely as the wiring behind them. He thought he had taken my mobility. He didn't realize I had just started taking inventory. I didn't argue after that. I didn't lunge for the keys or slam the door. I let Ethan believe he had won something important. He slipped the keys into his jacket pocket like a trophy and gave Sabrina that small nod they share when they think they've handled me. Good, he said. We'll come by tomorrow to schedule the assessment. You won't need to, I replied. He didn't ask what I meant. He assumed it was denial. That's the danger of underestimating someone. You stop listening. They left together, their car backing out of my driveway with unnecessary force, tires crunching over gravel I had paid to have laid 15 years ago. I stood there until the red of their taillights disappeared at the corner. Then I closed the door. The house was quiet again. The clock in the hallway ticked with irritating precision. I walked to the kitchen, lowered the heat under the lentil stew, and stirred it once. My hands were steady. I have arthritis in 2 fingers, but steadiness has nothing to do with joints. It has to do with decisions. Ethan thought he had taken my only set of keys. He forgot something. I walked down the hallway toward the small linen closet near the guest room. Most people store towels there. I store contingencies. Behind a stack of old crocheted blankets, inside a tin box that once held Danish butter cookies, was a spare key fob. Not because I'm forgetful. Because I don't build my life on a single point of failure. I picked it up and felt the familiar weight settle into my palm. You're not done, I murmured. Not to the car, but to myself. But this wasn't just about driving. The keys were symbolic. What mattered more was the pattern. I returned to the walnut desk in my study and opened my laptop. Not the old one Ethan insisted was too complicated, but the newer one I bought quietly 6 months ago. I logged into my bank account. Password unchanged. 2-factor authentication still routed to my phone, not his. I began scrolling. Automatic transfers. Mortgage support. Temporary assistance. Property tax contributions. Insurance renewals. Every month for years. Some payments were labeled vaguely: family expense, shared maintenance, bridge support. That had been Ethan's wording. I remember because I allowed it. I believed I was helping him stabilize after a difficult year. What I saw now was different. The apartment he lived in? My name was still listed as co-owner on the original deed. I had insisted on that when I provided the down payment. He had rolled his eyes back then, called it unnecessary. I called it prudent. The house he and Sabrina moved into 2 years later? The mortgage was approved only because I signed as guarantor. My retirement portfolio was used as proof of stability. He didn't build that foundation alone. And I never transferred my percentage. I leaned back slowly, letting the information settle. This wasn't revenge forming, it was clarity. I opened a second folder. Scanned documents of the Hale family trust Thomas and I established before his passing. The trust was simple, structured to protect assets and prevent mismanagement due to undue influence. I remember the lawyer's exact phrasing: undue influence. At the time, I thought it referred to strangers. Now I wondered if the definition had always been broader. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. "Did you calm down?" he asked. I was never agitated. "You have to understand, Mom. We're just thinking long term." "So am I," I replied. There was a pause. He didn't like when I spoke in complete sentences without emotional leakage. It gave him nothing to push against. "We'll pick you up for groceries tomorrow," he continued. 9 a.m. "That won't be necessary." He sighed. "Mom, I have transportation." Silence. "What does that mean?" "It means I won't be inconveniencing you." He hesitated. I could hear Sabrina whispering in the background. "Don't do anything reckless," he said finally. Reckless. I looked at the spare key in my hand and almost smiled. "I've never been reckless in my life, Ethan." After I hung up, I didn't rush outside. That would have felt reactive. Instead, I printed copies of the property documents, highlighted key sections, flagged dates. I sent a short email to an old acquaintance, Daniel Whitaker, estate attorney. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. I kept it brief. "I need to review asset protections and guarantor liabilities. Urgent." Then I waited. Not anxiously, strategically. An hour later, I stepped into the garage. The air smelled faintly of motor oil and cedar from the storage shelves Thomas built himself. My sedan sat there, polished last week. Full tank, registration current. I pressed the spare fob. The lights blinked in obedient recognition. I slid into the driver's seat and rested my hands on the steering wheel. The leather was cool, familiar, mine. For a moment, I simply sat there, not because I doubted myself, because I understood something Ethan didn't. Taking the keys was the first move, but it wasn't the strongest one on the board. I started the engine. It purred to life without hesitation. And I drove out of my own driveway. I didn't drive far. That wasn't the point. I circled 3 blocks, stopped by Holloway's Market, and bought a small box of cardamom biscuits I didn't need. The cashier, a boy with silver earbuds dangling from his hoodie, smiled at me and said, "Have a good afternoon, ma'am." No hesitation, no pity, just normalcy. It's amazing how powerful normal feels when someone tries to take it from you. When I returned home, I parked exactly where I always did. Straight, centered. Perfectly aligned with the crack in the concrete Thomas once joked was our property line inside the garage. I hadn't even taken off my coat when my phone rang again. Sabrina, this time. "I heard you drove," she said, skipping any greeting. I did. There was a controlled inhale on the other end. "Maggie, this isn't a game." "You're right," I replied. "It isn't." Ethan's voice appeared in the background. "Put it on speaker." A click. "Mom," he began, that strained patience returning. "Why are you being difficult?" difficult. There's a particular tone adult children use when they believe authority has quietly transferred to them. It's subtle, almost bureaucratic. I went to the market, I said calmly. I bought biscuits. That's not the point. No, I agreed. It isn't. Silence again. He shifted tactics. We talked to Dr. Feldman. He said memory lapses at your age can escalate quickly. We're just being proactive. I let that sit. Did Dr. Feldman examine me? I asked. Well, no, but then he offered a general opinion, not a diagnosis. Sabrina cut in. Maggie, you got turned around last month. I chose a different exit, I corrected. That's not cognitive decline. That's preference. Ethan exhaled sharply. This is exactly what I mean. You're refusing help. Help again. Ethan, I said slowly, are you concerned about my safety or about liability? What? If I drive and something happens, does it affect your insurance? Your finances? That's ridiculous. Is it? Another silence, longer this time. Because here's what he hadn't expected. I had already reviewed the insurance policy that morning. My car, my policy, my coverage. No shared liability unless I explicitly transferred it. I don't want to fight, he muttered. Then don't, I replied. He hesitated before speaking again. We're coming over tonight. You can come, I said, but you won't take anything. The line went dead. I placed the phone down gently and returned to my desk. Daniel Whitaker had already replied to my email. Available tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bring all trust and property documents. We'll review guarantor exposure. Efficient man. I always appreciated that about him. I printed another set of documents and slipped them into a structured leather portfolio, the kind with reinforced corners and a gold zipper. Thomas once called my war folder. I never liked the word war, but preparedness? That I respect. At 6:30, Ethan's SUV pulled into my driveway again. This time there was no attempt at subtlety. The engine stayed running. They entered without knocking. We need to settle this, Ethan said immediately. You need to sit, I replied, gesturing toward the dining table. Sabrina remained standing. Ethan pulled out a chair, frustration radiating off him. You're forcing us into a position we don't want to be in. What position is that? Considering legal guardianship. There it was. The escalation. Sabrina crossed her arms. If someone's unsafe, the family has a responsibility. I folded my hands neatly on the table. Unsafe how? You're acting impulsively. I went to the grocery store. You defied a reasonable boundary, Ethan shot back. A boundary requires authority, I said quietly. Who granted you that? His jaw tightened. We're your family. And I am not your dependent. The room felt smaller, thicker. I could see it dawning on him that this conversation wasn't bending the way it usually did. I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't retreating. You don't want this to get messy, Sabrina warned. I met her eyes for the first time that evening. Messy for whom? Neither of them answered. Instead, Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and placed my car keys on the table. But he didn't slide them toward me. Prove you're capable, he said. Take the assessment. Until then, these stay with us. I looked at the keys, then at him, and I realized something essential. He still believed he controlled the negotiation. He didn't understand yet that I had already moved beyond negotiation. I have an appointment tomorrow morning, I said evenly. For what? He demanded. To review paperwork. His expression flickered, brief, involuntary. What paperwork? I allowed myself the smallest pause. The kind that determines who actually owns what. That was the first time Sabrina's confidence cracked, and it was the first time Ethan looked uncertain. Daniel Whitaker's office hadn't changed in 15 years. Same dark mahogany shelves. Same faint scent of ink and old paper. Same brass scale of justice on the corner of his desk that always looked slightly tilted, as if reminding you balance requires effort. He stood when I entered. "Margaret Hale," he said, with a polite nod. "You look well." "I am," I replied. "That's precisely the issue." I placed the leather portfolio on his desk and unzipped it carefully. I handed him the trust documents first, then the apartment deed, then the mortgage guarantee paperwork for Ethan's house. He adjusted his glasses and began reading in silence. I didn't fill the room with nervous chatter. Silence is a tool. People reveal more when they think you're waiting for reassurance. After several minutes, Daniel leaned back. "Well," he said slowly, "this is substantial. Clarify. You retain 35% ownership of your son's apartment. The title was never amended." He flipped a page. "As for the house, you are primary guarantor. If you withdraw support, or if the trust revises its exposure, the lender can reassess terms." Meaning, he said carefully, your son's financial stability is directly connected to your consent. There it was. Not emotion, not family tension, structure. "And guardianship?" I asked. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "On what grounds?" "They're implying cognitive decline." "Do you have a diagnosis?" "No." "Any medical records suggesting impairment?" "No." He closed the folder. "Then an attempt would likely fail, especially if we obtain a current evaluation demonstrating competence." I nodded once. "And if I choose," I continued, "to remove my financial involvement?" He didn't hesitate. "You have that right. It would create pressure, possibly significant." Pressure, such a polite word for collapse. Daniel steepled his fingers. "Margaret, forgive me for asking directly. Is this retaliation?" "No," I answered immediately. "It's correction." He studied my face. He has known me long enough to recognize resolve when he sees it. "Very well," he said. "Here's what I recommend. First, schedule an independent medical evaluation. Neutral, undeniable. Second, we issue formal notice clarifying your retained ownership in the apartment and your rights regarding the guarantor status. Third, we amend the trust to restrict any implied authority your son may claim. Do it." He paused. "This will escalate things." "They escalated first." Daniel allowed himself the faintest smile. "Understood." We spent the next hour drafting language. Precise, controlled, clinical, no anger, no accusations, just facts. Before I left, he looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "You realize," he said, "once you initiate this, the dynamic changes permanently." "It already has," I replied. Outside, the air was crisp. I walked to my car, and sat for a moment before starting the engine. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned. My phone buzzed. "Ethan." I answered on the second ring. "What are you doing?" he demanded without greeting. "Having a productive morning." Daniel Whitaker called me. Of course he did. Courtesy notification. Professional obligation. "And?" I asked. "Why is a lawyer reviewing property documents?" "Because property documents exist." "Mom, don't play games." "I'm not." His voice lowered. "Are you threatening us?" I considered that carefully. No, I said. I'm reminding you. Of what? That dependence goes both ways. Silence. I could hear his breathing, sharper now. You're overreacting, he muttered. I drove myself to a legal consultation, I replied calmly. That doesn't suggest incapacity. You're twisting this. No, I'm straightening it. He exhaled in frustration. Sabrina is very upset. That's unfortunate. You're putting us at risk. I've been carrying your risk for years. Another pause. Longer this time. Are you going to pull support? He asked finally. I looked through the windshield at the small cafe across the street, where a woman my age was laughing with a friend over something frothy and extravagant. Perhaps a pistachio affogato, or one of those absurd oat milk concoctions with gold dust on top. Life does not shrink unless you let it. I haven't decided, I said. That's not fair. Fair. I almost admired the simplicity of that word. Neither is confiscation, I replied. He didn't respond. I ended the call first. Then I started the engine and drove home, fully aware that what had begun as a dispute over car keys was quietly transforming into something far more structural. They believed they were protecting me from risk. They were about to discover who had been protecting whom all along. Ethan didn't come over that evening. Instead, he sent 3 messages. The first was clipped. We need to talk. The second was longer, filled with words like misunderstanding and stress. The third was silence, which with him was never empty. It was calculation. At 9 the next morning, my phone rang again. Mom, he began, voice measured now, almost cautious. Can we meet? Just you and me. I prefer clarity, I said. You can come here. He arrived alone. That, more than anything, told me Sabrina was worried. He stood in my living room without removing his coat, as if he didn't intend to stay long, or as if he no longer felt entirely welcome. You blindsided us, he said. I responded, I corrected. You're making it look like we're exploiting you. I tilted my head slightly. Are you? His jaw tightened. That's not fair. Then explain the structure to me, I said evenly. Explain why my name is still on the apartment deed. Explain why I'm the primary guarantor on your mortgage. Explain why automatic transfers labeled temporary have been running for 4 years. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he paced once across the rug Thomas and I bought in Santa Fe decades ago. Hand-woven indigo threads still strong. You offered help, he said finally. You insisted. I offered support, I replied. Not control. That's not what this is about. It became about that when you took my keys. He stopped pacing. That was about safety. No, I said quietly. That was about authority. Silence expanded between us. You think I'm trying to take over your life? He asked. I think you got comfortable making decisions without asking. That's ridiculous. Is it? I gestured toward the dining table. Did you ask before setting up shared account visibility? Before suggesting power of attorney just in case? Before discussing guardianship with your wife as if I were absent? He flinched at that. So Daniel told you, he muttered. I don't require gossip, I said. I require transparency. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I've seen since he was 16 and cornered. Fine, he snapped. Yes, we talked about options, because you're not getting younger. And neither are you, I replied calmly. He opened his mouth, then closed it. You don't understand how expensive everything is, he continued, shifting tactics again. The house payment, property taxes, Sabrina's business loan. If something happened to you and we weren't prepared. Prepared? I echoed. Yes. If you lost capacity suddenly, we'd be scrambling. Scrambling for what, Ethan? He hesitated. For stability, he said. There it was again. That word. Stability built on whose foundation? I asked softly. His silence this time was not defensive. It was revealing. I leaned forward slightly. You wanted predictability, access, assurance that the infrastructure remains intact. You're twisting it. I'm naming it. He looked tired suddenly, older than his 43 years. What do you want? He asked finally. I want acknowledgement. Of what? That this is my life. My assets, my decisions, not transitional property waiting to be redistributed. He exhaled slowly. And if I say that? Then we renegotiate the structure. He frowned. Renegotiate? Yes. I slid a folder across the table toward him, copies of the deed, the trust provisions, the guarantor clause highlighted in pale yellow. You retain your apartment, I said. But we formalize a buyout schedule for my share. His eyes moved quickly over the page. And the house? He asked quietly. The lender will be notified that my guarantor status is under review. You can refinance independently within 12 months. That's impossible, he said immediately. Is it? You know interest rates right now. I know numbers, I interrupted gently. I've known numbers longer than you. He looked up at me then. Really looked. This could destabilize everything, he said. I've been stabilizing everything, I replied. The room felt heavy, but not chaotic. Structured tension, like the moment before a chess piece is moved. You'd actually do this, he said, disbelief softening into realization. Yes. For what? Pride? For boundaries. He stared at the highlighted clauses again. You're serious. I've never been clearer. He stood slowly. You'd risk our home over car keys. No, I said. You risked it when you decided I was no longer autonomous. His mouth tightened. If you proceed with this, he said carefully, Sabrina will fight. She's welcome to hire counsel, I replied. He looked as if he wanted to argue further, but something had shifted in his posture. The certainty was gone. In its place was awareness. You're not backing down, he said quietly. No. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Then he picked up the folder, and for the first time since he took my keys, he left my house without trying to take anything else with him. By the end of the week, the pressure began. Not loud at first, subtle, administrative. Ethan didn't call. Sabrina did. You've put us in an impossible position, she said without greeting. I doubt that, I replied. The bank contacted us about reviewing guarantor exposure. Do you have any idea what that does to our credit profile? Yes, I said calmly. It clarifies it. You're destabilizing our refinancing options. I'm clarifying my liability. Her tone sharpened. This feels punitive. It isn't. Then what is it? Structural. She didn't like that word. You're acting as if we've done something wrong. Have you? I asked evenly. Silence. Then, Ethan is under enormous stress. So was I replied, when my autonomy was discussed like a scheduling conflict. She exhaled audibly. No one is trying to control you. You discussed guardianship. That was precautionary, without my consent. Her voice cooled. Families make hard decisions. Yes, I agreed. And sometimes they learn from them. After I ended the call, I received a notification from my bank. Attempted login from a recognized device. Ethan's. Access denied. He still had view permissions from years ago, something I had allowed when he claimed it would simplify coordination. I opened my settings and removed every shared visibility option, revoked digital tokens, changed recovery contacts. Clean, quiet, final. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. "Why did you block my access?" Ethan demanded. "Because it's my account." "I needed to check something." "You could have asked." "That's not the point." "It is exactly the point." He sounded rattled now. "We've always had transparency." "No," I corrected. "You've had access." "That's the same thing." "No," I said softly. "It isn't." He paused. "You're escalating this." "I'm concluding it." "You think cutting me off proves something?" "I'm not proving. I'm defining." He lowered his voice. "If you pull the guarantor backing, the bank can reevaluate the mortgage terms." "I'm aware. We could lose the house. Then refinance? You know we can't qualify a loan right now." There it was. Not anger. Fear. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated. "Sabrina expanded her design studio. We leveraged equity. Without informing me. You weren't directly involved." "I am the guarantor," I said quietly. "That is direct." Another silence. Thicker this time. "I didn't think you'd mind," he admitted. "That was the pattern," I replied. He inhaled sharply. "You're making this about power." "No," I said evenly. "You did." There was shuffling in the background. Sabrina again. "She wants to speak to you," he muttered. "No," I said calmly. "You can." He stayed on the line, but didn't speak. "I have an independent medical evaluation scheduled," I added. "Voluntarily?" "For what?" "So no one can question my capacity." "You're doing that to spite us." "I'm doing it to remove leverage." He went quiet. "Mom," he said finally, voice lower now, almost stripped of performance. "If this goes public with extended family, it's going to look bad." "On whom?" He didn't answer. "I haven't told anyone," I continued. "But if guardianship was being considered, that would have required disclosure." "That's different." "How?" He struggled for a reply. I let the silence stretch. Silence reveals dependency faster than interrogation. "You're willing to let us fall," he said finally. "No," I corrected. "I'm unwilling to keep holding you up without consent." "You're my mother." "Yes." "And you're supposed to support me." "I did," I said calmly. "For decades." "And now?" "Now I expect you to stand." He didn't hang up this time. He simply stopped speaking. And I understood something clearly in that moment. This was no longer about whether I could drive. It was about whether he could. The confrontation didn't happen at my house. It happened at my sister Evelyn's Sunday dinner, the kind where the table is too small for the number of opinions present. Roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, crystal glasses no one trusts, near children. Family terrain. Ethan arrived with Sabrina 10 minutes late. That was intentional. Late entrances control attention. Evelyn kissed my cheek. "You look radiant," she whispered. "I feel organized," I replied. Halfway through dinner, between a discussion about property taxes and someone's unfortunate gluten intolerance, Sabrina set down her fork. "There's something we should address," she said, voice sweet and amplified just enough to carry. Ethan kept his eyes on his plate. I continued cutting my chicken. Sabrina folded her hands. "We're worried about Maggie. She's been making some impulsive financial decisions." The table quieted. I placed my fork down carefully. Impulsive? Ethan cleared his throat. Mom revoked access to shared accounts and contacted the bank about mortgage restructuring. Evelyn blinked. Is that true? Yes, I said calmly. And she refuses a driving assessment, Sabrina added. That's not accurate, I replied. I scheduled an independent evaluation voluntarily. Sabrina smiled tightly. Without consulting us. I don't require consultation. Murmurs around the table. Cousin David leaned back. Is this about the car? It's about safety, Sabrina insisted. It's about authority, I corrected. Ethan finally looked up. Mom, please. I turned to him. You discussed guardianship. A fork clinked loudly against porcelain. Evelyn froze. Guardianship? Sabrina jumped in quickly. As a precaution, we're thinking long term. Without informing me, I said evenly. The room shifted. Not dramatically, subtly. The narrative Sabrina had started, fragile mother, responsible children, lost symmetry. Ethan's jaw tightened. You're twisting this. No, I replied. I'm clarifying it. David looked between us. Wait. You're still on their mortgage, aren't you? Silence. Ethan didn't answer. I did. Yes. And the apartment? Evelyn asked slowly. I retain 35% ownership. Several heads turned toward Ethan. Sabrina stiffened. That was temporary support. For 4 years? I asked. Ethan pushed his chair back slightly. We were going to restructure. When? I asked calmly. He didn't respond. Sabrina leaned forward. Maggie is threatening to destabilize our home over a misunderstanding. I am reviewing my liability, I said. You're punishing us. I'm correcting imbalance. Evelyn looked directly at Ethan. Did you take her keys? He hesitated. Yes. And discuss guardianship? Another pause. Yes. The room went very quiet. Not scandalous, not explosive, just aware. I took a sip of water before speaking again. I have no diagnosis of impairment. I handle my own affairs. I drove here tonight. Evelyn nodded slowly. You did. Sabrina tried once more. We were acting out of love. Love doesn't require confiscation, I said softly. Ethan looked trapped between defensiveness and exposure. For the first time, he wasn't controlling the frame of the conversation. The family wasn't seeing a confused elderly woman. They were seeing documentation. You made this public, Sabrina accused. You did, I replied gently, when you chose this table. Ethan stood abruptly. This isn't the place. You chose the place, I said. He looked at me then, not as a son correcting a parent, but as a man realizing leverage was dissolving. You're willing to embarrass us, he said quietly. I'm unwilling to be erased. The air felt charged, but not chaotic. The truth has a way of settling heavier than accusation. Evelyn folded her napkin slowly. Maggie has always handled her affairs, she said. If she's reviewing her exposure, that sounds responsible. Responsible. A word Sabrina had used earlier to describe themselves. Ethan didn't argue further. He simply said, We'll discuss this privately, and walked toward the door. Sabrina followed. The front door closed. No one resumed eating immediately. Then David muttered, Well, that explains a lot. I picked up my fork again. The chicken was still warm. And for the first time since the keys left my hand, I wasn't the one defending my competence. 3 days later, Ethan called a family meeting. Not at my house, not at Evelyn's, at his. Neutral ground, he said. There is no neutral ground in a house financed by someone else's signature. When I arrived, Sabrina had arranged the living room deliberately. Chairs facing inward, coffee table cleared, documents stacked neatly beside a glass bowl filled with decorative stones. Symbolism is wasted on people who don't understand structure. Ethan stood near the window, arms crossed. Sabrina remained seated, posture composed. "You wanted a discussion," I said, taking a chair without waiting to be directed. "We need resolution," Sabrina replied. "Define it." Ethan exhaled. "You're destabilizing our finances and publicly implying we're exploiting you." I stated facts. You framed them. I clarified them. Sabrina slid a folder toward me. "We consulted an advisor." I opened it. Projected refinancing scenarios, asset consolidation plans, a proposal suggesting partial equity transfer from my retained apartment share in exchange for formalized caregiving authority. Caregiving authority. "You're asking me," I said slowly, "to trade ownership for control." "It's structured support," Sabrina corrected. "No," I replied, "it's leverage." Ethan's patience thinned. "Mom, you're 72. Yes. You won't be able to manage everything forever. Neither will you." He ran a hand through his hair again, that familiar fracture in his composure. "This isn't about winning," he said. "It became that when you tried to redefine my capacity." Sabrina leaned forward, voice lower now. "We have documentation of recent erratic behavior." I looked up. Define erratic. You drove after being advised not to. You revoked financial transparency. You initiated legal restructuring without family discussion. I let that settle. You're describing independence. We're describing instability. The air tightened. Ethan stepped in. "If this continues, we'll pursue formal evaluation." "I already completed one," I said evenly. Both of them stilled. "What?" Sabrina asked. "I saw a neurologist yesterday. Full cognitive panel. Results are pristine." I placed a copy of the medical summary on the table. Sabrina's eyes scanned the page quickly. Ethan didn't move. "You did that without telling us," he said. "Yes? You're trying to outmaneuver us." "No," I said quietly. "I'm removing ambiguity." Silence expanded across the room like a pressure shift before a storm. "You think this makes you untouchable?" Sabrina asked. "No," I replied. "It makes you accountable." Ethan's voice lowered. "If you pull guarantor status, the lender can reassess terms immediately." "I'm aware. That could force a sale." "Yes." "And you'd let that happen?" "I would allow consequences." He stared at me as if seeing someone unfamiliar. This is the moment, my dear friends. A son realizing his mother is not a dependent, but a pillar. If you were sitting in that room, would you soften or would you stand firmer? Tell me below. Sabrina's composure cracked slightly. "We expanded the studio because we believed we had stability." "You leveraged my guarantee," I replied. "Without consultation." "It was understood." "It was assumed." Ethan finally sat down. "You're not just correcting structure," he said quietly. "You're dismantling our safety net." "I am withdrawing from being it." The words landed heavier than accusation. Sabrina looked at him, then back at me. "What do you want?" "Formal buyout schedule for my apartment share. Written acknowledgement that no guardianship proceedings will be initiated absent medical evidence. 12 months for independent refinancing." "That's aggressive," she said. "It's proportionate." Ethan's shoulders lowered slightly. The fight in him shifted. Less dominance, more calculation. If we refuse, he asked, then the trust will amend exposure immediately. He held my gaze. This was no longer emotional negotiation. It was structural consequence. And for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen since he was a boy, learning to ride a bicycle without training wheels. Uncertainty. The bank didn't wait long. 2 days after the family meeting, Ethan received formal notice. Guarantor review initiated. Documentation requested. Financial re-verification required within 30 days. He came to my house that evening without calling. This time, he knocked. I opened the door and let him in without comment. He looked tired, not angry. Tired. They're asking for updated income verification, he said. Debt ratios, liquidity statements. If they don't like what they see, they can adjust our rate. Yes, I said. You triggered this. I clarified my position. He walked into the living room slowly, like someone entering a negotiation room instead of his mother's home. They're reassessing because your trust amendment signals withdrawal risk. Correct. You could have handled this privately. I did. That's not what I mean. I know. He rubbed his forehead. Sabrina's studio expansion hasn't stabilized yet. We projected another year. With my backing? Yes. There was no deflection in his tone now, just admission. I sat down and gestured for him to do the same. Why didn't you tell me? I asked quietly. He hesitated. Because you would have worried. I am worried, I replied. About something different. He looked at me. You assumed access, I continued. You assumed permanence. You assumed I would absorb the risk indefinitely. You always have, he said. That was generosity, I replied. Not obligation. Silence filled the room. You're forcing us into survival mode, he said. No, I corrected. I'm requiring adaptation. He stared at the floor. They might force a partial equity review, he admitted. If that happens, we may need to liquidate assets. Which ones? He didn't answer immediately. The house, he said finally. The word lingered between us. That's a possibility, I acknowledged. You'd let your grandkids lose their home? The pivot was subtle, but deliberate. I held his gaze. Don't weaponize children, I said softly. He looked away. I'm not trying to hurt you, he said, voice lower now. But you were prepared to redefine me. That was precaution. It was preemptive control. He exhaled sharply. You're not the only one afraid. That caught my attention. Afraid of what? I asked. He hesitated. Failing, he said quietly. Losing what we built. With my scaffolding, I replied. Yes. The honesty in that single word shifted the room. For the first time, this wasn't about dominance. It was about dependence. I never intended to remove support without warning, I said calmly. That's why you have 12 months. If refinancing fails, then we restructure. How? You buy out my apartment share. You reduce liabilities. You live within independent margins. That's not simple. Neither is guardianship. He flinched slightly at that. The wind outside brushed against the trees. The house creaked faintly. Old wood settling. This house has stood through recessions, illness, storms. Stability isn't built on denial. It's built on adaptation. You've already amended the trust, he said quietly. Yes. So there's no going back? No. He sat there a long moment. You're serious about pulling guarantor status if we don't comply? Yes. He nodded slowly. Then he asked something he hadn't asked once since this began. What do you need from me? Not what do you want. What do you need? Respect, I said simply. And acknowledgement. He swallowed. And if I give you that? We move forward, structurally, not emotionally. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. This isn't how I imagined things unfolding. It isn't how I imagined them either, I replied. He stood after a while. I'll speak to the bank, he said. And a refinancing advisor. That's appropriate. He walked toward the door, then paused. You drove today? He asked. Yes. Anywhere complicated? I almost smiled. Yes, I said. Through traffic. He nodded once. And for the first time since he took my keys, he didn't question whether I should have. Refinancing does not happen quietly. Within 2 weeks, the bank scheduled a formal review meeting. Ethan asked if I would attend, not because I had to, because my signature still mattered. We met at the lender's downtown office. Glass walls, controlled lighting, neutral carpet designed to make everyone behave responsibly. A young loan officer named Mr. Callahan greeted us with professional composure. Mrs. Hale, he said politely, thank you for coming. I value clarity, I replied. Ethan sat beside me, not in front, not across, beside. Callahan began outlining numbers, debt-to-income ratios, liquidity thresholds, exposure risk. Sabrina's studio expansion had improved revenue projections but increased short-term volatility. Without my guarantor backing, approval conditions would tighten. We can proceed, Callahan explained, but collateral adjustments may be required, either asset consolidation or equity infusion. Define equity infusion, I said calmly. Cash injection sufficient to offset guarantor withdrawal. Ethan inhaled slowly. How much? He asked. Callahan stated the number. It was substantial. Not impossible, but substantial. Ethan turned to me. Not accusatory, not defensive. Calculating. I can cover part of that by liquidating investments, I said evenly. But not as guarantor, as loan. He looked at me carefully. Terms? Formal agreement? Interest. Defined repayment schedule. Secured. Callahan glanced between us, sensing the shift from family tension to structured negotiation. You'd lend? Ethan asked. I would invest. Sabrina, who had remained quiet until now, finally spoke. Why make it harder? I'm not, I replied. I'm making it accountable. She folded her hands tightly. We're not strangers. No, I said. Strangers document everything. Silence. Callahan cleared his throat. If Mrs. Hale converts guarantor exposure into secured private lending, the bank can reevaluate risk more favorably. Translation: structure stabilizes perception. Ethan leaned back slightly. So you'd help, he said. I never stopped, I replied. He studied me. This is about boundaries. Yes. And control. No, I corrected gently. Clarity. The meeting lasted another hour. Scenarios, projections, timelines. 12 months became realistic under revised terms. Difficult, but realistic. When we stepped outside, Sabrina remained inside to review paperwork. Ethan and I stood on the sidewalk. You could have let us fall, he said quietly. I don't want you to fall, I replied. I want you to stand without assuming I'll absorb the impact. He nodded slowly. I didn't realize how dependent we'd become, he admitted. That's what frightened me, I said. Not the car. No. He exhaled. I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting predictability. He almost smiled at that. Maybe, he said. Traffic passed in steady waves. The city moved forward, indifferent to personal power shifts. You'll still drive? He asked after a moment. Yes. And you'll keep the appointment records? Medical updates? Yes. He nodded. Not because I owed him, but because transparency goes both ways when it's voluntary. Sabrina exited the building, expression unreadable. We can make this work, she said carefully. Yes, I replied. We can. But something had changed. They no longer spoke to me as if I were fragile. They spoke as if I were involved. And involvement, real involvement, requires equal footing. The keys had never been the true asset. Leverage was, and now it had terms. For a brief moment, it looked almost stable. The restructuring documents were drafted. The private loan agreement was formalized, secured against Ethan's equity share. My guarantor exposure would phase out over 6 months instead of 12 if refinancing metrics improved. Clean, documented, accountable. But stability under pressure reveals fault lines. 3 weeks later, I received an email. Not from Ethan, from an attorney. Subject line: Notice of intent to petition for protective oversight review. Not guardianship. Not yet. Protective oversight. Language evolves when strategy adjusts. I read it twice before calling Daniel. They're testing threshold, he said after reviewing it, not alleging incapacity, suggesting monitoring due to recent financial volatility. Volatility they created, I replied calmly. Yes, he agreed. But optics matter. The petition cited restructuring activity, asset amendments, intra-family lending adjustments. In other words, I had taken control. And that, apparently, looked unstable. Do we respond? I asked. We do more than respond, Daniel said. We document. By evening, I had assembled everything. Medical evaluation, cognitive assessment results, bank statements, trust amendment rationale, loan agreement. Clean chronology. No emotional commentary. The next morning, I requested a meeting. At my house. Ethan arrived alone again. He didn't sit. You escalated, I said evenly. It's not guardianship, he replied quickly. It's the first step toward it. It's precautionary. You've used that word before. He looked frustrated, not aggressive, cornered. Sabrina is scared, he admitted. Of what? That if something changes suddenly, we'll be unprepared. The bank review rattled her. She thinks formal oversight protects everyone. Formal oversight, I repeated softly. Over me? It's not about control. It always becomes control. He ran a hand over his face. You're 72, he said again, quieter now, and cognitively intact. I know that. Then why this? He hesitated. Because when you moved to restructure everything without warning, it felt like instability. It was reaction to instability. He didn't answer. I stood and walked to the dining table where I had laid out copies of the documents. This is the neurologist's report, I said. This is the independent cognitive panel. This is the chronological summary of financial adjustments and why they were necessary. This is the signed private loan agreement stabilizing your refinancing path. He stared at the stack. You prepared all this, he said quietly. Yes. You expected this. I considered it. He sank into the chair finally. I didn't file it, he admitted. Sabrina did? Yes. And you supported it. Silence. Yes. There it was, not malice, alignment. I need you to understand something, I said calmly. Once oversight is initiated, it never fully retreats. Even if dismissed, the implication lingers. He looked at the documents again. She thinks it protects us, he said. From what? I asked gently. He didn't answer. Because the truth was uncomfortable. It didn't protect them from my instability. It protected them from losing leverage. I will contest it, I said evenly. He nodded slowly. I figured. And if it proceeds, I continued, the trust will accelerate guarantor withdrawal. His head lifted sharply. That's retaliation. No, I corrected. That's consequence. The room felt different now. Not heated, but final. You're willing to push this to court, he said quietly, if required. He studied my face for a long moment. Then something shifted. Not fear, recognition. You're not afraid, he said. No, I replied. He looked down at his hands. I thought I was being responsible, he said. You were being protective, I said softly. Of your position. He didn't argue. He just sat there, absorbing what that meant. Because somewhere between car keys and legal filings, the power dynamic had inverted. And now he understood something he hadn't at the beginning. I wasn't reacting. I was governing. The petition did not make it to court. Daniel filed our response within 48 hours. Medical certification attached, financial chronology organized, structured lending agreement outlined in exacting detail. The narrative of protective oversight began dissolving the moment it encountered documentation. 3 days later, the attorney who had sent the notice requested a call. Not with me, with Ethan. He came to my house that evening without anger, without posture, without Sabrina. They're advising withdrawal, he said quietly. On what grounds? Insufficient basis. Strong medical documentation. No demonstrable impairment. They said proceeding would likely fail. I nodded once. And? I asked. He swallowed. And it could reflect poorly on us. There it was again. Optics, reputation, exposure. Not my instability, theirs. They didn't expect you to be this prepared, he admitted. I didn't expect to need to be. He sat down slowly, as if the room carried more weight than usual. Sabrina thought legal structure would create certainty, he said. It created escalation. He nodded. They warned that if we push further without evidence, it could appear coercive. That word matters, I said calmly. Yes. Silence stretched between us. Not hostile, but reflective. You would have accelerated the guarantor withdrawal, he said after a moment. Yes. And forced the equity review. Yes. He looked at the table where weeks ago he had placed my keys as leverage. You were ready to let the bank reassess everything. I was ready to let reality assess everything. He exhaled slowly. She's embarrassed, he admitted. About what? That it looks like we tried to control you. I met his gaze evenly. Did you? He didn't answer immediately. Then, yes. The honesty didn't feel triumphant. It felt corrective. I never wanted to strip you of stability, I said. I wanted acknowledgement. I know. No more filings, I continued. He nodded. No more oversight discussions. No more precautionary positioning. He nodded again. And in return? He asked quietly. In return, we follow the structure already drafted. Refinancing continues. The private loan stands. The buyout schedule remains intact. He leaned back. This is permanent, he said. Yes. The dynamic won't go back. No. He absorbed that. Then he asked something different. Do you trust me? I considered it carefully. I trust you to act in your interest, I said. Now I expect you to act transparently. He gave a small, almost humorless smile. That's fair. Outside, the wind pressed lightly against the windows. The house felt steady. Not because conflict had vanished, but because it had been defined. You'll keep driving, he said quietly. Yes. And we won't question it. Unless there's evidence. He nodded. When he stood to leave, he hesitated near the doorway. I didn't realize how much of our stability depended on you, he said. I did, I replied. He looked at me differently now, not as liability, not as vulnerability, as infrastructure. And infrastructure, once withdrawn, reshapes everything built upon it. The refinancing process moved forward. Slower than Ethan liked. Faster than Sabrina expected. The bank approved conditional restructuring pending equity adjustment and the formal registration of my secured loan. My guarantor status would terminate upon final signature. For the first time in years, my name would no longer anchor their mortgage. That shift was not symbolic. It was structural. Ethan came over one evening with a spreadsheet printed in color. Projections, cost reductions, liquidation scenarios. He laid it out on my dining table like a battle plan. If we accelerate the buyout of your apartment share, he said, tapping a column, we can reduce the private loan burden and improve approval terms. Timeline? I asked. 6 months instead of 12. And the funds? He hesitated. We may need to sell the apartment. The words landed gently, but they carried weight. You're prepared for that? I asked. It's cleaner, he admitted. Less overlapping leverage. Cleaner. I nodded slowly. The apartment was never meant to be permanent, I said. It was stabilization. He looked at me carefully. You knew that. Yes. He folded his hands together. Sabrina thinks downsizing might be smart anyway, he added. The house stretched us. It stretched you because it leaned on me, I replied evenly. He didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back and said something I hadn't expected. I didn't realize how much pride was mixed into all of this. Pride? I didn't want to look like I still needed you. I studied him. Needing someone is not weakness, I said quietly. Pretending you don't is. He nodded once. The next week, the apartment went on the market. I drove by once, not to inspect, not to interfere, but to look. Brick facade. 3rd floor balcony. I remembered handing him the down payment check in a small envelope, his hands shaking with excitement. I had felt proud then. Now I felt something steadier, aligned. 2 offers came quickly, one slightly above asking. Ethan called me that night. If we accept, your equity share will be paid out in full within 30 days, he said. Accept it, I replied. No hesitation, no bargaining. The sale closed faster than expected. My share transferred directly into my account, not symbolic, not promised, not implied. Documented. Secured. The private loan terms adjusted accordingly. Reduced principal. Shorter duration. The bank finalized refinancing approval contingent upon removal of my guarantor status. Daniel sent the confirmation 2 days later. Exposure terminated. I sat in my study with the document in my hand for a long moment. 48 years of managing stability, and now, for the first time, I was no longer structurally responsible for someone else's foundation. Ethan came by that evening. "It's done," he said. "Yes." No guarantor, no shared title, no residual access. "Correct." He looked around the room, at the bookshelves, the framed photographs, the quiet steadiness of the house. "You really would have let the house go if we hadn't adapted," he said. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "I think that's what scared me most." "That I meant it?" "Yes." I held his gaze. Boundaries only work if they're real. He didn't argue, because he had tested them. And now he understood their weight. Outside, a car passed down the street. Inside, the air felt different. Not tense, not triumphant. Just recalibrated. For years, I had been the unseen beam supporting two structures at once. Now, one stood independently, and the other, my own, felt lighter. After the apartment sale closed and the refinancing finalized, something unexpected happened. Ethan came alone, no documents, no spreadsheets, no projections. He stood in my doorway the same way he had the day he took my keys, but his posture was different now. Less ownership, more awareness. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He walked into the living room slowly, as if reacquainting himself with the space. The house hadn't changed. The structure had. "I've been thinking," he began. "That's usually productive," I replied calmly. He almost smiled. "I don't think I realized when the shift happened," he said. "When I stopped seeing you as independent." "It didn't happen in one moment," I answered. "It happened gradually, through convenience." He nodded. "When Dad passed," he continued, "I stepped in more, handling paperwork, helping with online systems. I told myself I was easing the burden." "You were," I said. "But somewhere along the way," he added quietly, "I started assuming authority instead of offering assistance." Yes. The word didn't land harshly. It landed accurately. He looked down at his hands. "Sabrina grew up watching her grandparents decline quickly," he said. "She's terrified of being unprepared." "Fear explains behavior," I replied. "It doesn't excuse overreach." He inhaled slowly. "I supported the oversight filing because I thought we were protecting long-term stability." "You were protecting predictability," I corrected gently. He nodded again. "I see that now." Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable, just real. "You know," he said after a moment, "when the bank confirmed refinancing without your guarantor backing, I felt two things at once." "What?" "Relief and loss." "Loss of what?" "Knowing you were underneath it." I held his gaze steadily. "I'm still underneath you," I said. "Just not financially." That shifted something in his expression. "I didn't want to lose you," he said quietly. "You weren't losing me," I replied. "You were redefining me." He absorbed that slowly. "I shouldn't have taken your keys," he said. "No," I agreed. "I shouldn't have discussed guardianship." "No." "And I shouldn't have supported that filing." "No." He nodded. "I'm sorry." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't theatrical. It was clean. "I accept that," I said. He looked around the room again. The shelves, the framed photo of Thomas, the old Santa Fe rug beneath his feet. "You're stronger than I thought," he admitted. "I've always been this strong," I replied. "You just stopped looking." He let out a slow breath. "Can we start over?" he asked. "Not from the beginning," I said. "From here." He nodded. "That's fair." As he moved toward the door, he paused. "I didn't realize independence could feel threatening," he said. "It only feels threatening," I replied, "when it challenges assumption." He stood there a moment longer, then said something simple. "I'm glad you drove." "Yes," I said quietly. "So am I." The door closed behind him, and for the first time since this began, the silence in my house felt entirely my own. A month passed. The refinancing finalized. The guarantor release was recorded. My private loan agreement sat cleanly in a secured folder, tracked, scheduled, transparent. The apartment funds rested in my account, untouched except for a modest reinvestment into a low-risk bond ladder Daniel recommended. Life did not collapse. It recalibrated. Ethan and Sabrina adjusted their spending. The studio downsized to a smaller but profitable footprint. The house remained theirs. Not because I absorbed the risk, but because they managed it. One Sunday morning, I drove to the farmer's market alone. The air carried the scent of roasted almonds and fresh basil. I bought heirloom tomatoes and a small jar of fig conserve I didn't need but wanted. I walked without hurry. I paid in cash. I drove home through traffic that would have once made Ethan tense. My hands were steady on the wheel. Later that afternoon, Ethan came by with the children. No agenda, no documents, just a visit. He didn't comment on my driving. He didn't ask about medical reports. He helped set the table without instruction. Sabrina lingered in the kitchen doorway, watching me stir a pot of minestrone the way my mother once did. Slow, deliberate, unhurried. "Your kitchen always feels solid," she said quietly. "It is," I replied. After dinner, Ethan remained behind while Sabrina took the children to the car. "I've been thinking about something you said," he began. "That narrows it down to several options," I replied dryly. He smiled faintly. "You said boundaries only work if they're real." "Yes." "I didn't believe you at first." "I know." He looked at me directly. "But you meant it." "Yes." He nodded. "I won't test them again." "That's wise." He hesitated. "Are you happy?" he asked. I considered that carefully. "I'm aligned," I said. He accepted that answer. When he left, I locked the door gently and returned to the living room. The house felt quiet, but not lonely. Structured, but not rigid. Mine. I walked to the hallway console and opened the drawer. Inside lay my car keys. Exactly where they belonged. My dear friends, sometimes love gets confused with control. Sometimes children forget their parents built the very ground they stand on. I don't know if Maggie was right in every step she took, but I know this: independence does not expire at 72. If this story moved you, tell me what you would have done. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're not done standing.